or however you want to do it.
I'll jump in. I'm ready to do some intros. So thank you everybody for joining today on a very rainy Friday in Chicago. But I know we've got people probably zooming in from all over the place. So thank you for joining us. We're really easy housekeeping rules is um please jump in anytime. There's no need to kind of worry about waiting to raise your hand, or, if you've got something pivotal at the time, jump in, say something. Try to keep it as concise and, minute limited as possible, because we've got a few topics we'd like to get through today. A general note for the talk is we're really hoping to explore the optimistic side of things with AI, and not just fall down the easy rabbit hole of the fear and negativity and job replacement and all sorts of things that can happen, and the we see and kind of the fear mongering on social media and all sorts of things. So we're going to try to keep it as uplifting and proactive and productive as possible on how we can really use these tools that are probably not going anywhere, to be really pivotal in making our jobs as creatives really important, and sticking around. So I will pop out. We have a couple. I'm going to stay in the Zoom, but I'll pass it off to our two kind of invited speakers for today. They're not going to bogart or handle every topic exclusively. It's going to be a very open discussion, but we wanted a couple folks who use and weave AI effortlessly into their day-to-day on the creative side. So I will hand off to Merrick, and we've got Nick also. And so I'll pass it off, and you guys can do quick introductions, and then we'll get into our first topic.
Great. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Jason, for hosting. And Bright Greatness my name is Merrick. I use he, him pronouns. I've been a product designer, experienced designer lead for almost 14 years now. Most formerly with Wayfair, Wells Fargo, and Gap, blending digital and physical experiences. If you're in the Chicagoland area, we recently opened the Wayfair store in Wilmette area. So part of that team, making that happen.
Which is beautiful.
It's pretty cool experience if you haven't
cool.
been there. Yeah. And so over the past year, I've been experimenting with AI tools and assistants, and integrating that into the different journeys, and from the beginning of discovery all the way through to the delivery section, and then measuring as well. And beyond that, I'm a diversity and equity inclusion advocate, and I'm really passionate about wellness and fitness and drinking coffee, which I'm enjoying here as well. So yeah, hi, another coffee drink. Thanks for having me. And
our
are we celebrating birthday?
Caffeine.
Yeah.
We are celebrating a birthday. Jason's birthday is today. Do we have any other birthdays on the call today?
45 years young.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, it's cancer season.
Yep.
Vanessa,
is your birthday coming up soon?
It's in July. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it feels soon given the length of a year.
Awesome. So Nick, do you want to go? You want to go?
Yeah. What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? My name is Nick Longo. I am a branding designer based in Los Angeles. I have a studio called Longo Designs, where we primarily work in food, beverage, restaurant design. This came after many, many years of my corporate gigs. I designed kids' meal toys for about 15, 20 years. So sorry for all the times you probably stepped on one as your child left it on the floor. But it was a great opportunity to understand branding and get into the idea of how to run a business. And now that I've been doing it for about 10 years on my own, I also teach graphic design and branding at Cal State Northridge here in Los Angeles. And I'm a producer and developer of tutorials and shows on Adobe, helping young designers kind of understand the tools and everything else. And my exposure to this came as not only as a solo entrepreneur and a business owner, but as someone who has to teach the next generation going out there into a workforce that is incredibly challenging right now. Then you add on top AI. I had to dive deep, and I spent like solid months just incorporating it in to end without any judgment, all of the different things that I can use in AI just to have data, just to have facts, and to be a part of these conversations and shed a little light on what I think maybe a lot of people should get a little bit more curious with it.
Perfect. That's a great
Awesome.
segue kind of into our first question. So Nick, if you want to keep the train running.
Go.
So in your journey of, no fear, I'm just going to dive in and just see what happens. What are kind of some of the really big advantages, in your work that you're seeing, and, things that maybe are really unique to creatives using it rather than, someone just popping on and, generating terrible songs like me?
Where I have really found I call it just like this surprise, is how it helps me sell myself and sell my business. In many times when it is in pitch mode and the budget isn't quite there yet to hire the copywriter or the photographer or whatever it might be, primarily in the copywriting, that to me is that's the gamble, right? If I do that before any kind of win, I'm just not comfortable with that at that point. So what I have been doing is primarily using ChatGPT in every form I can, regarding onboarding, regarding my website copy, my bio, anything I'm doing on the headlines on my website. They weren't really gaining much traction, and I went back on it and I thought, let's see what ChatGPT can do. So it rewrote a lot of that but based on the creative brief and all of the prompting that I knew was necessary for change. So it wasn't just blue sky, tell me how to make this better. I had specifics that I asked for. And once that kind of happened, then I got into when I'm doing the pitch and I'm sending the presentation or doing the presentation to a client. Where it has shined beyond my wildest dreams is the way I can storytell. And if you don't mind, can I share a screen really quick and show you just an example?
Sure.
Is that
Yeah,
cool?
that'd be awesome.
All right, great. So I'm going to show you this here. And let me know if you all can see that there.
Yep.
So primarily when I'm exploring concepts and showing logo design, and we're at a point like this where we have our 4 pieces, I'm usually just going concept 1, concept 2, concept 3. And now what I'm doing is I'm basically going in here and I'm actually giving them beautiful like kind of names and titles. I can upload that art and ask ChatGPT to say, describe this logo for me in a headline. How can I give it a title that the client will remember and fall in love with even more? So you can see rediscovering vintage charm, unlocking whimsical nostalgia. And granted, you should remember that when you're doing ChatGPT in a thread, it's remembering everything I have already done until I'm at this point. For brands like this was a logo that we designed for a credit union based here in Los Angeles. And I wanted to have not only a name, but I wanted to have some rationale behind it based on everything I had already said. And it gives me these beautiful paragraphs that as I'm presenting, I'm just seeing the client fall in love with these options even more. And I love this idea that I asked it, what could I call the name of this logo? And it gave me Serenity Swirl, but it didn't just find that from anywhere. It found it from my creative brief and all the words that I have dropped in there that the client and I have agreed on. So I'm using it for even backgrounds. Like sometimes this is the art we designed completely from scratch. I'm not using it in any way of selling it, but I needed the perfect stock photography for behind it. Packaging for kitchens and things like that. So my packaging goes on front of it, and I'm using Midjourney, Adobe Express, and some of these other ones to give me a background like that as well. The other thing I found is mood boards. I couldn't find a great kind of bridge to when I'm giving a mood board to a client before we even embark on anything. I wanted a name for that brand, that mood board, and some value behind it and some rationale. And it's given me these little bits and pieces of copy to really kind of give myself this upper kind of like advantage. I've never felt more confident presenting, and even returning clients that are getting this same new feature in there, they're telling me something's different. They're telling me this you told a story unlike ever before. And new clients are thinking, I've been doing this for 20 years. So like this is a win-win in a lot of different ways.
The question that popped in chat is, are you disclosing that you generated that with AI to your clients?
Yes, 100%. And in fact, I had a really good reason to, because when I was doing this test, I wanted them to be a part of it. And then I asked them if their permission, can I use some of the stuff that we're doing? There was no hesitation on any side from any of them at the beginning. In fact, a lot of them are now using it in a lot of different ways. And what's interesting that I've gotten asked on this a few times because I've presented this to spark the conversation. Where I got most of this and these tips were from my copywriter friends, because they're embracing it wholeheartedly. And now their businesses have like doubled because they have this like cool little co-pilot helping them along the way. And the same goes to say, like, if a copywriter friend of mine goes on Wix AI and builds a website for themselves, am I getting mad that that's lost business for me? No. I mean, like, I'm applauding that. I think what we're all becoming are these hubs of kind of talent and problem solving. And that's what I'm getting from this exposure and this exercise that I've done.
If I could jump in, because I'm hearing from you, Nick, is that you're using AI, using these tools to help augment or help take the things that you're, like you said, you're not confident in or wanting to expand on, and delegating, right? These different skills to these tools. And I've seen that I've used that similarly when we talk about around use cases, creating use cases, or like I already had a lot of inspiration or information around like a point of sale. But if I was able to generate a mind map really quickly, like out of Miro, and use the mind map tool and the assist there, it's like, oh, now I can see all these other parts of the web that I didn't recognize at first, and it would have taken me time to generate with a group of people. But now I have something to jump off of. I have something to go deeper on. It takes me from zero to something a lot quicker than trying to either find what I already made before or create something from scratch.
Yes. And so much more focused. And now when you get to do the creative work, you are in such a smaller, more concise and appropriate space for the ultimate solution that is going to work for not only a client, but the consumer of that client.
So let me ask everybody who's here a question related to this, because I think you both brought up an interesting part of our process, which is idea generation and creating. Has anybody used AI at a spot where they felt that they were out of ideas, or at my mind is blank, I need help, I'm stuck, creative block, help me, computer? Has anyone used it at that particular moment in a creative process to generate more ideas when you've already done your skill, but you just want to hear from other ideas? Has anyone want to pick that up?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey. Yeah, my name is Brendan Harwood. I do a lot of research around human AI co-creativity, and I've built systems that use generative AI to produce sticky notes during ideation. And I wrote a paper, if you Google CHAI-DT, it kind of shows a method for getting generative AI to help with co-creation and collaborative ideation.
Awesome. I mean,
Awesome.
I think that is, and can you share the link in the chat?
Yeah.
One of the things, and we were just talking about this a little bit before everybody jumped on, is one of the things that I see of value and of interest to me as a creative here is that it allows me to dabble and be better at skills that I'm not actually good at in real life. I see a lot of people shaking their heads, so maybe we all have that same thing. I've never, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never touted myself as an illustrator, a copywriter, an icon designer, a motion designer, things like that. That's not my skill set. I'm a UX guy. I'm an interface designer. That's where I thrive. And what I have always wanted to be able to do is have the opportunity to be able to say, and so for this particular triple scoop, our ice cream only merged into a little bit of a pirate theme with a crystal skull and some swords and, got weird. If I were to explain that to somebody that's really good at 3D rendering, they would probably be able to get there, but it might take a while. And also, I wouldn't be able to see the breadth of options that I could generate with prompts and with refinements. And so I really like Ideogram as my tool. It's for static stuff. And it helps me generate, what does this crazy icon look like that has never been made before? A skull with a sword going through its head and explosion. And what does it look like with an ice cream with skulls stacked on top, interspersed with the ice cream? I could have somebody do that as a creative producer, but also I think a lot of times with creative, when we are asked for the breadth of ideas, which is something that Figma just introduced this week in their config, where basically you have the ability to not only generate something, but then pick A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and then adjust parameters to what you want. The thing that is important to me there is that I don't think yet the computer can do it alone. It needs my prompt. It needs my input. It needs the ability to hear from me and refine off me and riff with me, as opposed to just producing it. But it does have the ability to quickly react. And I think that's something that is really fun with this. And we never really had that opportunity in creative before, because we would have to produce everything one at a time. We have some ability now to basically upload an image and say, can you just give me 3 more ideas that already use the image that I made, but are in the universe? And that's where crazy things start to come up. Like I was using glass bowls and AI brought in a glass crystal skull. And I was like, yes, now I'm going to use it, riff on it, grow with it. So I think that that's what's really interesting as a designer is the idea generation rapid. And I don't think that that diminishes value at the end, because we still have to get there. If we're going to generate something, okay, I will answer that in a second. But the thing that I think with the value of anything, and I've said this in design forever, simplest and easiest is going to most likely be the best answer for a lot of the projects that we work on. And getting people there is what's the difficult part. It's about, what do we strip down? How do we tell that story? How do we make it as easy for people as possible? And it doesn't mean that it's worth less because it's simpler. You still have to get people across the bridge to get there. And that, I still see it with AI generated stuff. In terms of attribution for those particular things, I think that we're still at a weird spot where we don't know what trained the AI. And so we don't necessarily have the ability to know why the answers are coming from the way that they're coming from. I mean, you see that like OpenAI can't give a straight answer about whether or not they trained off YouTube and other related, where did you get these images to train? I saw OpenAI signed a deal with Time Magazine yesterday for analyzing all Time magazines since the beginning. That's going to be a very interesting way to create historical stuff. So I don't necessarily know where certain things are coming from attribution-wise, but I do think that if I'm using something that I know is fully copyrighted, so I've been trying to animate some of my favorite still images from time. Michael Jordan's rookie card, X-Men #1 comic cover. I've been trying to animate those things because they've been static forever. What does it look like if X-Men 1 came to life? And the results currently are terrible. But I do know that I'm infringing on a copyright when I'm doing it. So that's a place that I know that we all have to be careful, but I'm going to just pause and release so that we could probably move on to question 2. I'll share some of my absolutely terrible experiments with this and at the end.
I was gonna add in, there's kind of 2 examples I have. Internally, I think more practical for work's sake. Started using Gemini a lot for analogs and pulling analogs, because time and time again, clients asking for more examples of this happening in the real world. The catch is that it's really good and convincing at making fake analogs, so we still have to do our work to make sure that it's a real thing. But we've been able to find some pretty unlikely partnerships that happened that maybe were smaller programs that kind of were a blip under the radar, and it's actually surfaced a lot of really cool things that we can pull up as analogous to something we're trying to get a client to do, which has been great. And then outside of work is probably where I use AI the most, and that's through Midjourney, because I use it a lot for character creation, things in role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons. Similar to you, Jason, I couldn't draw my way out of a paper bag, so when it comes down to that part and thinking about what my character looks like, what they are, I've been using it a ton to a lot of success. And I think the rule of thumb I try to give everyone in my company that's asking about using something, especially like image generation, is like, if you know in your head what you want it to give you, it's not the tool for you to use. Like, you got to be kind of open to being surprised and finding a new direction and taking inspiration off that and rolling with it. So I think it works great for something like a character creation where it's permeable. I'm still trying to figure out what I want that thing to be.
Awesome. And Aaron, you kind of touched on the next kind of topic that we'd like to kind of discuss, which is, what are clients asking for, and how are they asking about the use and implementation and preference for, utilizing generative AI or, some other kind of large language model, or does anyone have, a lot of on the ground experience with, clients coming with asks like, hey, I want you to do the role of 7 people, and now you can do that? Or is it, are clients open? I know, Nick, you said absolutely they are. So throwing it up to anyone who kind of wants to answer, but what are we seeing the conversation from, agency or creative side to client side regarding the use of AI?
I could share a bit from a like a partnering team perspective, like looking at it. Okay, there are with Wayfair, we went through a couple different rounds of layoffs, and there was like less and less people, right? So we're like, okay, how do we continue to, like, how do I, as a single designer on the team, still be able to do a lot of different work and pull the team together in different ways? And for me, it was one of those, working with my product manager partner and my engineering partner, like, hey, I'm going to try this. I'd like you to be a part of it. So inviting them along the journey for me was really helpful, especially using some of the AI tools that are within the tools that we're already using. So like even Jira is like pulling out some new things too, and how to use AI within these tools that we're using on a regular basis. Figma is the example you mentioned, Jason. They're expanding theirs, Miro as well. And so being able to take, for example, I used Beautiful AI recently to do some research. It's like, hey, here's a prompt. It'll create Beautiful AI will create a list. It'll create a list of slides about that topic. Yes, there's still bias, but at least there's still something that gives you, oh, instead of getting a giant prompt and a prompt with text back, now it's giving me like these different stages of stories, like answering what are the biggest opportunities for the area of retail and furniture, for example, like using something like that, and then it comes back with all this information. And so I found, by bringing people along that journey or showing them along the steps, that they're also then engaged in it too. And it kind of calls back to Nick, what you were saying, like being open about it. I'm not hiding that I'm using AI to help answer some questions. I'm actually using it as a partner and involving that partner with partners and teammates. And then other people jump onto it too. And then it takes it off maybe myself doing it and someone else like, oh, let me try this and let me try out these other options with AI too, and makes it a little more comfortable for us all to share, and not come from it from a place of strength and opportunity for each other, and not a place of hiding that we're using AI.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is it's kind of similar to Brandon, what you're putting in the chat there. I mean, most of our clients are, it's not at a task-based level. It's more of a, are you using it? How are you using it? What are you doing? Like, what can we do? I think they're still trying to figure it out, and it's a hard thing because we've tried to like train specific bits and pieces with clients, but it's moving so fast that by the time you formalize those training documents, like they're kind of worthless. And I think there's a misunderstanding in the difficulty of prompt writing, and I don't think people understand that it is akin to learning a full computer programming language to actually harness semblance of control, especially in the image space. And I think that's because things like ChatGPT feel very easy. You just put in a question and it'll spit something out. So they think it's the same on the visual side, but it's very hard. And the actual use cases that we're doing it's usually a blend of trying to get something to start from in a Midjourney and then pull it into a Photoshop and use generative fill there and parts and clean up different parts and then maybe use that as a reference back into Midjourney. It's kind of this like meat grinder type thing where you keep feeding things into each other to harness control. And it used to be like getting seeds and learning those and liking outputs. It's kind of very difficult, and I don't think people understand that. So it's a hard thing to make practical, and the companies like Adobe are already doing the heavy work of implementing them in their tools. So there's also kind of a, is there really a market here to train people? It's kind of getting rolled out at a rate faster than we can anyways. So we're just waiting.
No, this is a really interesting topic that we've been discussing internally quite a bit, is especially when designing for AI and training people how to design new AI systems, at the end of the day, people learn by doing. And you can provide a bunch of documentation about like, here's exactly what an AI model does, here are the base capabilities, here are the tasks it can perform. But when you provide an interface where they could say, oh, this is teaching me almost in the background as I use it, how AI does what it does. I think that's what makes a lot of, I guess, applications stick in their mind, you know?
I want to break apart all of those comments related to the tools that have been created in the past, let's say 24 months. There's I've been in a pitch where I'm showing a video on YouTube and it's followed by an ad from Wix that's like, make your website for $9 with like it's almost like embarrassing. And to have those kinds of things happen. And I think there's a big difference between what you just explained and Wix's version of copy and paste the URL and effectively steal, all of the IA and creative visual of a URL that you put in. I think that the creative tools are still allowing us to be creative, but I also think that there's this like super highway that's bypassing everything completely, which is this range of tools that everybody's talking about. They're going to be in Figma. We'll be able to edit it. But I think that we're talking about visual a lot, but I also think that there is a really good use case scenario for when we ask a client to give us that like one sentence hard hitting, who are you? And you get a 9-page manifesto, when it's not our job to unpack that brand for the people. And you can take that and basically put it into ChatGPT and say, synthesize this into 3 sentences. And then you could come back and say, this is what you said you are in 3 sentences. And that's something that would take a long time previously, and it might take weeks of discussion, when you could generate that and say, that doesn't feel like me yet. Make this more funny. Make this in the style of this. Add this. And I think that's really important, because in the process of working with clients over all the years, you would say, give us all the photography that you've ever shot of your office, and none of it's usable. But you can see, oh, this is a white office. white walls. It's nice and airy. It's a loft. It looks like it's in New York and whatever. And you could start to take, I know Dan was doing it as a joke, but he tried to recreate our office using AI prompts. He got pretty close.
Got pretty close.
He got pretty close. It wasn't any of our staff, but it was
Right.
looked pretty much like our office. And that was only doable knowing where you were trying to go. But I think that there's this wide range of tools that encompass not only I saw an Instagram post that was for some app, and it was like it basically edited a podcast using AI and computer knowledge, and it took and edited the whole thing, and I watched how it went through the edit, and it did it in like 10 seconds. That's a valuable, if it gets it right. I mean, but you could still then move your chunks around and build your story, but that's something that could save a lot of time. That's what I wanted to just kind of touch on when we talk about how we're using different tools. But there is a question in here about how would you charge? And this isn't one of the questions that we're going to talk about, but your time is valued at whatever you think your time is valued at. And I don't think the tools that we use will change. That would be like me saying, well, I used to do this by hand, but then Photoshop came along. Do I change my pricing? No. If it takes me an hour, it takes me an hour. Or if I say it takes me an hour, or I say it's worth $100, it's worth $100. That's the professional piece of our industry that I do think some stuff will change, but I also don't think that it's something where we would say the tool is, solving this for us. That would be like saying that all manufactured products should be free because, a machine bulk manufactures all of our food and all of these pieces and my shoes and my clothes. It didn't necessarily make a Nike less valuable. In fact, just goes up over time, just like everything else gets expensive. So I would say it doesn't change pricing. It just gives us ability to maybe produce ideation a little bit faster. Here comes in Mina from Korea.
Gosh.
She joined.
The theme also caffeination for Mina.
Yeah. Has anybody had any instances that they can share that are specifically about a client? Yes, in philosophy, it's our hour is an hour of our time, but are we seeing difference in asks or difference in conversations when kind of starting projects? Does anybody have, I know on the client side or on the internal side that aren't in the creative, are the conversations around time and price changing, or are they, it takes you as long as it still takes you?
Are you saying that in relation only to AI?
Yes.
I haven't received any kind of comment, pushback, or anything in the upfronts of putting together the estimate or, delivering a proposal that hasn't been asked in any way. I think in the flip side, what it's done is if I'm more robust, if I have more capabilities to add on to that initial proposal to them, it's almost like they might be expecting an even higher price. So like I'm trying to find the way to use it in that advantage, and make sure if anyone was to ever ask or to want to see behind the scenes of that, obviously I would show them where it would be used, but it's not really used in anything too final in a visual sense. I would say more in like the copy side, like I had mentioned earlier. But I just love this idea of like, it's very similar to what happened with desktop publishing, and everybody went, well, it's got to be cheaper, or you're using that now, doesn't it only take 5 minutes to create a logo or whatever that might be? Our job is to still show the value of us as the professional telling you what to do. So I've even changed kind of in my approach in being more of the professional to them, saying, you're hiring me for the talent and the history and the experience of what I'm going to give you as a brand. You know what I mean? So it's helping me in more ways than just what I showed and what I highlighted here, I think it's just giving me so much more confidence to realize like I'm your point person. You know, when you come to us, you don't need anybody else. And I think that's just a confidence I'm absolutely loving at this point.
So I want to hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet, but I want to ask a question specifically about finality with AI. Matt, I want to direct a question towards you, which is Toys R Us released a fully AI commercial this week. No actors, no actresses, no union, no. And Matt's in advertising, and he could give a 5-second introduction, but I want to know what the reaction was in the advertising space and marketing space when something was effectively completely final as an AI generation. You're muted,
Do we
Matt.
know if Matt is here? He may be letting his dog out.
Yeah, I was gonna say he turned his camera off, so he may have stepped away. There he is.
Oh, here
Sorry,
he is.
I did. I had to go do something real quick. Was there a question?
Yes,
You-
There
yeah.
was.
specifically for you.
Oh my God, really?
I wanted to ask, because we were talking about usage of AI generated materials in final form versus ideation versus generation. Toys R Us released a completely AI
Yes.
commercial this
Yes.
week. I know you're in advertising. I wanted to hear a little bit from your perspective of no actors, no actresses, no
Yeah.
union, no travel, no post. What's kind of the thoughts, and you can introduce yourself too, but what are the
Yeah.
thoughts in the advertising space that now a major brand did something like this?
Yeah. Thank you. My name is Matt Reinhardt. I founded OKRP years ago, and we are now Barkley OKRP. And it's funny, we were having a creative council kind of retreat this week, and that very exact commercial came up. And I guess the reviews from the audience were, hey, I think you mentioned this up in the chat, Merrick, keep going, it'll get better. It was not met with much enthusiasm other than, oh my gosh, here we go, this is real. And while it looked like what was the Polar Express for toys, look, they're going for it, and we see a lot of references of films, and I think we got the new Tom Hanks film coming out that I think uses some of that, or at least it's locked off in one position. So we're up for experimenting with this. I don't think we've been asked necessarily by clients to do that. We use it to ideate and do development work for. But to date, we've attempted on a few cases to do it, but there has to be a willingness or a desire by the clients to say, hey, we'd like to greenlight you to try this thing. And again, where does that go? We pride ourselves in humanity and soul, and kind of getting things that feel real. We kind of like the analog thing, but yet at the same time, we're with those prompts that we are passionate about. We would want to see what that looks like. Can we get to that space using AI? So it's funny you bring that up. That one was met with thumbs down, but as far as the overall aesthetic and feel for it, because it was kind of obvious and maybe a little too magical, but it's here. And I think that, to your opening point about let's look at the positive thing in all this, it's going to get better. It's really, input in gets input out. And so, I don't know if I'm really answering the question other than we saw it, we reacted to it. We still believe in, the human touch. And again, I think as the more we play around with this stuff or figure out moments where it is most applicable, sure, all those things that you listed off at the beginning, no talent, no, no location, no travel. I mean, I'd be curious as to what that cost to develop. But it was probably had some cost savings to it.
I would cap that with, am almost certain that Sora AI paid Toys R Us to
Right.
be first
Yeah.
guinea pig in
Yes, sure.
in the mix, and they probably had their most expertise users help them get there.
Yeah.
But I think that what you just talked about, and this is where all of this is going, which is the Turing test, which is, do you know that you're interacting with something that is artificial or not? And I think that Toys R Us one is exactly what you said. It looks like Polar Express. It doesn't feel human. Dan was making songs all week with AI, and he's like, make it sound like James Bond, and it sounds like Pixar. And it's like nowhere near the correct feel yet. However, I am starting to see that companies and people that I've been following on Instagram are not real. And I didn't know it until it took me a while to kind of sniff it out. And I think that there's going to be, this Toys R Us one was a really interesting kind of first taste. But it's the same thing for us. Like, you can generate a website with Wix and using a prompt, and it's coming to Figma, and it's coming to all these different spaces. But I think there's that question of how long is it going to take that it actually, with input, can achieve that you don't know the difference. Was it human hand or was it computer completely?
I got a question for everybody, maybe even just by raise of hands. Compared to maybe 12 months ago, when everyone was telling us and showing us where AI visually was going when it comes to generative AI creation of sound, art, motion, whatever it was, do you think it's as much of a threat as you thought it was going to be just a year later?
Are we raising our hands for yes?
Oh yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that was a hard.
Sorry, yeah, I forgot. But like, if you think it
is.
is the threat that it was 6 months, a year ago, raise your hand.
Nick, if I may,
Yeah, please.
elaborate upon that. I'm a veteran creative director and designer. I've seen many of my industries die. I started off in the music industry designing record packages. That doesn't exist anymore. Then I went into advertising. The way that it used to be doesn't exist anymore. I then worked in corporate identity and branding, and this is where I've been, and I currently teach in the Masters in Branding program at the School of Visual Arts. And I'm working on a book, actually, on the role of AI in brands. And the class I teach at SVA is based on the philosophical tradition and critical theory. So when you ask if I see it as a threat, I don't really see it as a threat. I see it as like one of these kind of like massive transformations where all the conversations that we're having today about the generation of images is going to become irrelevant within a couple of years. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to have Siri, they're finally going to fucking fix Siri, right? And when they fix Siri, there's going to be digital kind of avatars interacting with digital avatars. My digital avatar interacting with digital avatars from other brands. This explodes the customer journey. This explodes the whole notion of even like, how do I find information? So, Jason, you said that you're a UX designer. UX design is going to be imploded, right? Because we're not going to be going to Google and typing in search terms anymore. I'm just going to be picking up my phone. I'm going to like click the side of my head or whatever and say, hey, Siri, like I'm looking for this. And then a thing will be presented to me. So this is, so I don't see this as a threat. I just see it as a massive evolutionary shift into how we behave. Now, the opportunity is, as we as creative people, can we take these tools? And these tools are going to be, these tools are beyond just like the very notion of my classic education as a graphic designer. These tools are about how do I, as an individual, deal with other people. And so the point for me, the whole point is about subjectivity. Now, Jason, when you mentioned the Turing test, the Turing test will never be fully recognized, and not never say never. It's not going to be met within the next 10 years or so, okay? Because we can't even define consciousness. And so you're describing an entity that has actual consciousness, but we can have a simulation of subjectivity where I get the sense that someone's trying to tell me something. And so the whole point so for me, as I look at these tools, I think about where is the vector of subjectivity through this thing. And I, everything else, I am agnostic to the form of the thing. I'm thinking about the subjectivity of like, what is the energy of someone, what this thing that I think is another person trying to say to me. Yeah. So forgive me for speaking in very broad terms, but that's kind of like what's running through my head as I'm listening to all of you speak, is that you think that you need to get ready and like prepare yourself for generating AI images and all of that. Oh, no. That's last year's battle. Mm-hmm. We're discussing the war of 5 years ago, all right now, right? We have to like really leap ahead.
Yeah.
So since you're in education, let me direct a next kind of brief question to you, which is, how are we justifying the value of art and design school with?
I don't. I just finished an endowed professorship at RIT, and our students are woefully ill-equipped for the world that's about to happen. And so there's the whole notion of like skills and like, I still have colleagues who are complaining about the students not knowing typography. I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, that's kind of like buggy whip designers talking about how we no longer use buggy whips and horses, Now, there are people that do really beautiful buggy whips, right? And there is going to be a small niche kind of space for that. But this kind of like overexpansion that happened in education across things like graphic design. I mean, like right now, there are like every year, there are over like, what is it, like 100 or so thousand students graduating with graphic design degrees. I'm like, where are we going to put these people? There's not enough space. So I do think that a lot of people are woefully under-skilled. And so what I tell my students, and now I teach in a branding program. And so what I think it was Dan or Nick. No, Nick, you were talking about how you were using ChatGPT to kind of like write descriptions for your presentations, right? Mm-hmm. That's basically strategy, right? I mean, that's like one aspect of like what strategists do.
Yeah.
So what you've done is you've destroyed a whole like regime, a whole domain of activity, which is strategy. And so in this kind of implosion of roles, what Professor Scott Galloway calls AI corporate Ozempic, for a reason, right? Because we're going to go through that phase where things are disappearing. But my response to my students, sorry, it's a long way of getting around to your question, Jason. My response to my students is I say, whatever you do, right? If you're going to be working in branding, and if branding is about creating kind of emotional connections between audiences and brands, or audiences and services or products, the classic way of looking at this thing is in a very instrumental way, which is based on the Harvard Business School case study model, where we look for innovation and we try and copy these innovations that happen within that. Now, I find that the Harvard Business School has given us the great leaders of the world. It's given us the leaders of companies and presidents of countries, on top of it. But the Harvard Business School has also given us climate crisis, fractured politics, and economic inequity. So basically, I think that there's other models that we can look at, which is why I look at philosophy and critical theory. So there's the whole, in other words, my answer is the soft sciences. We have to know more about the soft sciences, which is sociology, psychology, anthropology, ethnography, all that kind of stuff is now going to become the matter that we work with. And so AI is going to force us to work harder, but work harder in an intellectual sense.
To as a counter to that, the reason why I would raise my hand as a threat for that is solely because there's a struggle of getting clients to pay to achieve
Yeah.
their particular voice versus 2 years ago. So
Right.
I would say that is it just you? Okay. I would say it's incredibly important that we are always on our toes. And I would say, because I went to college with T-squares and drafting boards also, there was like, and by the year I graduated, that was gone. And then everything went to the computers. And that was kind of the transition. And it was like, am I threatened that I don't need this T-square anymore? Not really. I'm more interested in how it's going to transition to using and understanding these same skills with a different medium than what I just spent, all this money on learning. I think it's going to be the same thing for branding. There will be people who have that eye to not only think in brand, but also push way out of the box. I think that AI a lot of the times is giving us the answer that it thinks that we want. And I think that the ends of the bell curve are going to become the most interesting places.
Yeah, to that, yes. But first, I want to push back slightly because I suspect that you may be looking at branding and defining branding in a way different than I do.
Okay.
So I define branding as an association in a person's mind. That is a brand.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the instrumentality of branding, where it's like we're going to build a positioning and we're going to work out with some sort of like customer segmentation, and for that I'm going to do an identity system and a verbal system and a set of behaviors and all that bit. That only goes so far. It all comes down to like how is it received in people's minds, which is why I'm concerned about the notion of subjectivity, because with this multiple layering of avatar on avatar kind of battle that's going to be happening very soon. I'm really interested in how that kind of association is going to be made and what's going to happen there. So what I'm doing in response to like what you're talking about is I'm trying to find a way for my mind to focus my mind in a different way and try and look at it from around the corner, I guess is the best way of describing it. Instead, and like give up this kind of sense of control that I have about what I'm making, and see if I can find another way, another space for it. It's very difficult, like I'm not making a lot of money doing this right now, but I mean, I'm in a space where I'm able to kind of think about it, and that's all I can offer at the moment.
Mark, you make me think of something like referencing like the history in the past, and like your experience with all the disruption that's changed, and it's made me thinking like 10 years ago, 5 years even ago, like think about design systems or way that different tools are not connected, right? Very, very disparate. Like what we're going through right now with like all these different AI tools or all these other different things. And calling back to what Aaron was saying of like, I have to know to go into Midjourney and then go back to ChatGPT and then do this and then add this and then come back and try to connect these dots together. Like until we get to a place where that becomes an ecosystem, right? Like that's the future we're headed to, right? Like as everything else has become, like
but that ecosystem is going to be so radically different. I mean, yes, all the conversations that are happening around like this one, like I've been to lots of these webinars, right? And it's all basically kind of variations of the same kind of conversation. Like, how do I use it? That whole ecosystem has a short lifespan.
Right. And then so then using our tools or the way we're thinking, the way we're activating and engaging with it.
You have to use your different tool.
You still have to think differently. Yeah.
But the thing is, when you talk about your experience and your professionalism, your professionalism and your experience is not contained within your tool set. It's contained within your lived experience and the kind of the passion that you brought to design and the notion that design is potentially a gift that you can offer someone, right? So now if I think of it in that way, then the gift that I can potentially offer the customer in this new world of AI with the avatar and avatar like interactions is expediency and removing friction, right? And so I think of like walking through an airport. I have to go through all this bullshit when I walk through an airport, right? I have to go through security, and I have to get my ticket and all that bit. But in the very near future, I mean, every government knows what our face is, right? So facial recognition's out there. That horse has left the barn. So between facial recognition and the fact that I wear an Apple Watch and the accelerometer in my watch knows my gait. Cameras know my gait, the way in which I walk, right? AI is at the point now where we're going to lose passwords, right? Because AI will know just by the microsecond, the micro rhythms of your fingers typing or swiping on something, whether or not it is actually you on that device, right? So in the future, I can imagine a wonderful future where I just like walk into an airport and like walk through and go to get on the gate and get on the airplane, right? Because I've already been cleared without me having to go through all the stuff, right? So that's how I look at it. So design, design as a gift, like an opportunity for me to give someone an aesthetic experience, is now expanded. The opportunity expands, and so that's how I try and think of it. I'm trying to enlarge my mind to that point.
So I want to wrap with a thought related to that partially, but I want other people's I want other people to kind of talk about this. I am seeing this acceleration faster than I've typically seen in my entire career, 25 years. We used certain tools for 5 years, 10 years, and now I'm seeing things come. The ecosystem, like you said, I don't think it really matters. I think it's whatever the flavor of the month is, and that's going to keep happening. But it's faster, and it's accelerated at a spot where, and Aaron mentioned this earlier, by the time that it would take me to make a brand's visual identity system, the computer can actually do it and do a pretty good job of it for me right now, and I could go in and make my tweaks. We have this future that's coming down, and these tools will all be there, and it's accelerating, and we're talking 10 years, 5 years. What is it going to look like with the growth of these things? I'm interested to hear, because in the comments there's talking about like systems design, and there's talking about accessibility, and I think the reality of all that stuff is just computer science is already probably better than the human at a lot of those types of skills. Like our human eye can't tell us if something is on the border. It could tell us that something is or isn't accessible. We'll know, like, can I see this or not? But it won't be as precise as a computer analyzing accessibility, sizes and colors and things like that. I think that UX will be solved because it'll know, just it in general will know, this is the best converting versions of these things. These are the best, the highest style designs version of these things, and add it all together, and you kind of have like, it's like baking your cookies, like all these pieces come together. I think that's been kind of our last 10 years of skills. But I'm interested to know what people think is, and so we already have some of this. Empathy, human voice, understanding of psychology, all of the things that Mark was mentioning will be important. And I've honestly thought that's the only reason people really go to college in the past 20 years anyway, is to figure out how to interact with other humans. But I'm interested to know what people think will be a really valuable skill that you're going to need in partnership with the fast-moving technology and ecosystem. What do you think is something that we would be focused on in 24 months from now? Let's just say to stay relevant. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of these tools can do things better than a lot of people. So when I talk about relevancy, humans we think we're all really good at everything and skilled in all these things. And the reality is the computer is probably already better than all of us with a lot of the stuff. And so what are some of the places that people want to explore that will be able to allow us to stay creative and maintain the space 2 years from now?
I think it's language, human language. Like, honestly, like the way in which humans categorize things is woefully underrated in things like prompt writing. The ability to be more specific. I think that, like, when I'm using Midjourney, honestly, my general art courses are probably the strongest thing that are helping me out with that, right? Like really understanding like, oh, we call this period of art this thing, and this thing is, we have a word for that. I think that a deeper understanding of our own language, because that's how the machine thinks. It has all of those words in there, and that specificity is into its programming. And it means something because over time we have made it mean something. But I think we've gotten so relaxed with language that we don't use a lot of these words, and we don't wax poetic about everything in our lives. And that ability to actually be more creative, more descriptive in everything we're doing, that translates much better into the machine, and that gives us more control. So I think that's an underrated value.
You brought up something that is really interesting, which is, has anyone heard a 10-year-old speak lately? It's like a totally
I have one,
different,
I can tell you.
it's like a totally different language. It's like we are not even on the
Gibbity.
same planet. And if that's the model coming our way, I'm very nervous.
I just want to talk very briefly about being a systems designer and having a good visual eye. Like, I think I previously mentioned that I have an accessibility certificate as well as I do systems, but my training is in graphic design. And I found a very interesting niche in where accessibility, it is trash. It makes visual design look really ugly. And the thing is that without having the visual design eye and also understanding the laws behind accessibility, because their WCAG guidelines 2.1, 2.2 are very fuzzy. And I actually have to use my own human judgment, my own visual design eye, and understanding like what the engineers want and what they're willing to do has made me actually very invaluable, because like I can give buttons and I can give, modals and everything to the designers, and they'll be making things that look like trash. And if I don't actually do that on this fundamental skills level of like understanding these tools and making tools for the designer with a good visual eye, things are just going to turn apart and like look very, very ugly. So actually pairing like the technical ability to talk with engineers, pairing the ability to like have empathy for our users, so anybody with ADA disabilities, and then having a very strong graphic design degree has really helped me maintain relevancy. And because I understand that, and also having all those skills, I can really traverse against product, brand, marketing. So when somebody comes to me, I can tell them I'm not a branding designer, but I do understand that like in your product, your Spotify app has to look like the .com experience, and help them thread that through line through. That's a massive skill that most people don't have, that I think all graphic designers understand. We understand ecosystems. We understand like how to surgically go in and help our clients understand that, you can't just use 40 tools. We already do that. We use Slack, we use Deal, we use all these disconnected tools, but you need a human to actually guide the experience, because it's not computers talking to humans, it's humans talking to humans.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity for designers. If you look for, where is humanity? If you look, how do you help the user, like accessibility, and how can you make it still like a beautiful and creative experience to interact with?
Let me ask you, so you have a very specialized, you have those skills. Graphic designers and a lot of people on here and lots of people who are working in this have to consider those topics, but don't have the training or skills.
Mhm.
Do you see the value in the tools helping the people that may not necessarily be skilled to get there? And I think this loops all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, which is we can create things and learn. There are Figma plugins that help me with accessibility and usability that bring in other knowledge and things like that. What do you see? What would you say to someone who doesn't have any training in exactly what you just spoke about, accessibility, empathy, working with disabilities, who needs to solve for that, and their company isn't considering that at all?
I think
the designer is considering it.
I think that accessibility is just one tool that most designers have to kind of touch on. Like I only have an introductory certification. I don't have the most high level like I am never going to be a web developer, but I do know the very basics, which is like color contrast is an issue. People are colorblind. Like you can take a free edX course right now and get a certification for free. Like it's, I think, broad awareness, and because most people don't have that broad awareness, making sure that the clients are aware of that brings a lot of value, because I think somebody had mentioned that amidst all the tools and experiences, we are the point people. And I think we should own that. Like a lot of us have done corporate branding. A lot of us have done like, you know, proper graphic design in terms of like iconography and layouts. Iconography and layouts are still being used in Figma. Like what I also wanted to mention is that with AI, that's looking backwards. What AI can only be trained on what has already been done, but we as creatives are creating the future. You can't prompt the future, really. It's really hard to do that. Like I think of like the Tinder app. We were doing things a certain way and then somebody created, I don't know, the swipe mechanism. It's up to us to create that. And that's the exciting part of graphic design. Like, you know, all of our experiences together, like stay creative and staying curious and applying whatever tools and skills we have now. It's going to be the key to like our next, you know, stage of being a graphic designer. Like, I don't want to stop working in graphic design, maybe for a little bit, because I'd rather open up a coffee shop and do my own art for a little bit. But, you know, after that time, like I would love to continue being a designer because like there's a lot of hope, you know, for what will be designed in the future and us being people who guide in the future. So I feel very strongly about this. Yeah.
We could
super
tell,
strong.
and I agree.
And I think a lot of folks agreed. Seeing lots of head nodding all around. We
That's what I
definitely
wanted.
want to be respectful of everybody's time. We know we're a little bit over the hour. And last time, if you know, if anyone wanted to stay on and continue the conversation for a few minutes, we're happy to keep the Zoom open. But also we want to not handcuff you to the Zoom on a Friday afternoon. So we'll kind of officially soft close now. And thank you to Nick and Merrick and everybody for really, really great insight and, you know, thoughts and optimism. And, you know, I'm glad we kept it. This has to probably be one of the most you know, positive chats around AI, you know, in a group of creatives, I think, for, you know, at least probably ones that I've seen.
All right, Dan, Midwest, goodbye.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll call it there.
Bye, guys.
All right, thanks everybody.